Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first lecture for Agribusiness Entrepreneurship 388. Before we get started, I just want to mention that even though our course title includes agribusiness, this class will be relevant whether you're in the agriculture industry or something totally different. The material can definitely be applicable for everyone. So with that, let's get started on our Mindset Part 1 lecture. We're actually going to be using some slides from another lecturer, Sam Altman. He does a great job with just laying it all out there with the idea, how important it is behind it. So we're going to take some points from him and run with it. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. The 4 areas you need to excel at to maximize your chances of succeeding in creating a successful startup include the idea, the product, team, and execution. But before we jump in to the how, I want to talk about why you should start a startup. Let's begin by saying you shouldn't start a business just to do it. There's much easier ways to get rich, and it's going to be a lot of hard work. You should only pursue one if you're feeling very compelled by a particular problem and you think starting a company is the best way to solve it. The specific passion should come first, and the startup only second. Okay, so let's dive into the idea. You shouldn't spend time throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall to see if it sticks without even thinking about the value if it works. This isn't to say that this is totally wrong and things don't evolve in ways that are difficult to predict. And there's a limit to how much you can figure out without getting a product in the hands of users. Great execution is 10 times more important and harder than having a good idea. But with that being said, a bad idea is still bad. Great execution towards a bad idea will get you nowhere. Again, there are exceptions, of course, but most great companies start with a great idea. If this idea works out, you could be pursuing and building on it for 10 plus years, so it's worth some upfront time. Also, even though a plan in itself is useless, the exercise of planning is definitely missing in most startups today. Also, long-term thinking will give you a huge advantage. Remember, the idea will expand and become more ambitious as you go. So you really need to start with a nice kernel, something that can develop in interesting ways. You need a business that is difficult to replicate. Once again, let me reiterate that the idea comes first and the startup comes second. Wait to start a startup until you come up with an idea that you feel compelled to explore. This is also the way to choose between multiple ideas. If you have several ideas that you think are pretty good, choose the one that you think about most often. That's a problem I have on the farm, definitely. So many ideas of ways to expand and just not enough time in the day to pursue them all at once. So narrowing down and really focusing your energies on one to get it right before you move on to another is super important. Another way of looking at this is that the best companies are almost always mission-oriented. It's difficult to get the amount of focus that large companies need unless the company feels like it has an important mission. And it's usually really hard to get that without a great founding idea. A related advantage of mission-oriented ideas is that you yourself will be dedicated to them. It takes many years to build a great startup. And if you don't love and believe in what you're building, you're likely to give up at some point along the way. There's no way I know to get through the pain of a startup without the belief that mission really matters. A lot of founders, especially students, believe that their startups will only take 2 or 3 years, and then after that, they'll work on what they're really passionate about. However, that almost never works. Good startups take a long time. A third advantage of mission-oriented companies is that people outside the company are more willing to help you. You'll get more support on a hard, important project than a flimsy one. The hardest part about coming up with great ideas is that the best ideas look terrible at the beginning. The 13th search engine, and without all the features of a web portal, most people thought that was pointless. Search was done, and anyways, it didn't matter that much. Portals were where the value was at. Or another example, the 10th social network, and only limited to college students with no money, also terrible. MySpace had won, and who wants college students as customers? Or finally, a way to stay in strangers' couches? That just sounds terrible all around. These all sounded really bad, but they turned out to be good. If they sounded good, there would be too many people working on them. Here's the theme that's going to come up a lot. You need conviction in your own beliefs and a willingness to ignore others' naysaying. The hard part is that this is a very, very fine line. There's right on one side of it and just plain crazy on the other. But keep in mind that if you do come up with a great idea, most people are going to think it's bad. You should be happy about that. It means they won't compete with you. That's something I struggled with in college, was sharing ideas. I always thought someone would steal one of my amazing ideas and run with it before I got the chance to. But I found that not to be true. Every time I did share, I was surprised by how much great feedback I got back, and it actually helped me start a lot quicker and more successfully by sharing with my peers and professors. This is also another reason why it's not really dangerous to tell people your idea. The truly good ones don't sound like they're worth stealing. You want an idea where you can say, I know it sounds like a bad idea, but here's specifically why it's actually a great one. You want to sound crazy, but you want to actually be right. And you want an idea that not many other people are working on. It's okay if it doesn't sound big at first. You can build it up to be in the future. You also really want to take time to think about how the market is going to evolve. You need a market that's going to be big in 10 years. Most investors are obsessed with the market size today, and they don't think at all about how the market is going to evolve. In fact, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that investors make. They think about the growth of the startup itself. They don't think about the growth of the market. I care much more about the growth rate of the market than its current size. And I also care if there's any reason it's going to top out. You should think about this. I'd prefer to invest in a company that's going after a small but rapidly growing market than a big but slow growing one. One of the big advantages of these sorts of markets, these smaller, rapidly growing ones, is that customers are usually pretty desperate for a solution, and they'll put up with an imperfect but rapidly improving product. Okay, so while you're a student, one big advantage, well, one of the two biggest advantages, is that you probably have a better intuition about which markets are likely to start growing rapidly than older people do. Another thing that students usually don't understand, or it takes a while for them, is that you cannot create a market that does not want to exist. You can basically change everything in a startup but the market. So you should actually do some thinking to be sure, or be as sure as you can, that the market you're going after is going to grow and be there. In general, it's best if you're building something that you yourself need. You'll understand it much better than if you have to understand it by talking to a customer to build the very first version. If you don't need it yourself and you're building something someone else needs, realize that you're at a big disadvantage and get very, very close to your customers. Try to work in their office if you can, and if not, talk to them multiple times a day. Another somewhat counterintuitive thing about good startup ideas is that they're almost always very easy to explain and very easy to understand. If it takes more than a sentence to explain what you're doing, there's almost always a sign that it's too complicated. It should be a clearly articulated vision with a small number of words, and the best ideas are usually very different from existing companies, either in one important way or by being totally new. Any company that's a clone of something else that already exists with some small or made-up differentiator, like a beautiful design, it usually fails. So that's something we'll also work on in this class, coming up with a really short and clear statement about your business idea to share with people. So, as I mentioned, one of the great things about being a student is that you've got very good perspective on new technology, and learning to have good ideas takes a while. So start working on that right now. Many people often say that they wish they had done more as a student. The other benefit of being a student is that you can meet a lot of potential co-founders while at college. You have no idea how good of an environment you're in right now for meeting people you could start a company with down the road. Okay, so let's hop on over to Canvas really quick and look at our first project for the week, okay? In the first lecture I posted, I said I'd explain it a little more, so here's that explanation. If you click on it, you'll see that it's due on August 27th, which is actually a Monday. I want you to have 7 days for this, okay? It's due on midnight and it's worth 5 points. So the whole premise behind this is that we just went through a lecture with ideas, right? Getting the right idea before you start a business, making sure it's worth your time to pursue and that you are passionate about it. So for 1 week, I want you to keep a log or a type of journal with every single problem you face, okay? That could be the bus takes too long. That could be this certain technology isn't available for farmers. Anything, okay? I want it to be a long list. I don't care if you can't see a business idea for all of them. The whole premise is this is just to open your eyes to the problems of the world and start thinking about what could be made from a business. Project 2, which is I'm going to assign next week, relates directly to this. If you want a little preview of what that's going to be, go to the syllabus and look at the description of it, or you can just be surprised and take one assignment at a time, and I'll explain it next week too. I suggest reading this write-up for more information on the ideas behind this project, and good luck. This should be fun and pretty straightforward, not too time-consuming. Again, this project is just centered on problems that you find in everyday life. So keep that journal handy or that log handy so you're not compiling problems in your head that you can forget later. Also, if you think of problems in your life that you encountered earlier, like in the summer or just in the past in general, especially if you're thinking about creating a business from one of these, write those down too, okay? And with that, just keep those due dates in mind. Good luck with your first week of class, and I'll see you guys next week.